Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you? And where you should not. For my ally is the Force. And a powerful ally it is. Life creates it. Makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings though we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you. Here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere. Yes, even between the land and the ship.
Welcome, Force users, to the Frugal Force. This is episode 6, and tonight we're going to be going over probably a couple different things. Firstly, we got to do intros. So how's everybody doing tonight? Oh, let's go ahead and go around my screen. We'll do Smiley's Garden. How you doing tonight?
Good, man. I'm doing awesome. I was a little under the weather here this morning, but all right. Doing better. So glad to be hanging out session. It's all fun.
Spark Grown, how's your garden week going?
Doing good, man. Sitting here trimming some of my last Frugal grow, some baby Huey. It's all still needs to be trimmed, but other than that, everything's been going pretty much. You know, every day is the same thing, just a little bit further closer to harvest, or I'm harvesting. So it's always a good day.
What's the smell on that baby Huey? That was one of the morning stars I didn't get to do yet.
It's really strange to me because I can smell a little bit of like the grapefruit that you'd get in the purple microdot. Mm-hmm. But I'm getting a way more strong like pine, which is such a strange combination, grapefruit and like pine.
Right, that would confuse your tongue.
Like, yeah, so I can't wait. I'll probably be grinding some of this up later and trying it out. I can maybe give you some flavors too. We'll see. So I got a cookie first.
Red Setter Farms. How you doing with your great Jedi aura over there?
I'm doing great. What's going on, Frugal Force, Frugal Council? Spartan, dude, the smell of pine takes me back to when I was probably like 21 or 22 and hanging out with my buddies in Kalamazoo at Western. It was the first time I had some really giant, just Christmas tree looking nugs and smelled like a Christmas tree too, man. I loved it. What's going on, Frugal Force? I'm Red Setter Farm. Excited for a great hangout tonight. Good session. Smoking on a nice bowl of some Flow dry sift and some roseberry underneath. Ready to rock and roll.
Hell yeah. Thanks for joining tonight, guys. I'm smoking on some Farmer Fresh Skunk One because, I mean, I could not resist. I had to get down. It's good right off the stick.
Right off the stick.
Mm-hmm. But first up tonight, we kind of wanted to revisit some of the stuff or something that we missed that was kind of crucial in the cytokinins and auxin episode. And Smiley submitted some really cool information on that, and I was hoping that we could share that with everybody.
Yeah, man. And this is a shout out to that Advancing Eco Agriculture too. So John Kempf kind of provided all this kind of info, but when we were talking that balance, and he was talking about how nutrition can actually relate to that auxin to cytokinin dominance as well. So he kind of listed like 4 nutrients that really drive vegetative growth, and nitrate, potassium, chloride, and calcium were those 4. 3 of those kind of tie in and deal with producing more of an auxin dominance, and one of them kind of ties more to a cytokinin dominance. So nitrate, potassium, and chloride will tend to drive the plant more towards, it shifts that balance more towards the auxin side. And typically the way they would measure that, because he's always agriculture, so they talk about like their internode spacing on there, but it's valid with cannabis too. And when you have auxin dominant growth, you may have 4 to 6 inch gap between your internode spacing. You may have really rapid growth, vertical growth, but they gauge the quality of that vertical growth by the number of internodes that are in that inch or 2 inches of growth or whatever that measurement is. And what he was saying is if you're driving your vegetative growth up from calcium, which to my understanding is meaning that you're balancing that calcium with the nitrogen and potassium at a rate that allows it to kind of have a dominant part of it. And because you would still need nitrogen and potassium, it's not like you can cut that out. But when you drive it off from a more calcium dominated vegetative growth, you tend to get tighter internodal spacing. You tend to get when you get that tighter internodal spacing, that branching, your stem actually tends to produce a lot denser carbon in it. And he was talking about like fruiting trees, but that denser carbon actually can hold more sugars. So like later in the flowering cycle, not only can that plant structure hold more flowers, and the more internodes is going to dictate how many budding sites are going to form when it flips. So you can drive your plant off calcium and build a tighter structured plant that's going to produce more flowers and be able to hold more weight and be able to function and flow enough sugar at the end to actually really make those buds set and hard and actually get that frost and the secondary metabolites that we're after. So I just thought it was pretty cool when I was listening to it, and I'm like, man, that really does play along with some of what we were talking about earlier. So
Yeah, it really makes me think because I'm going over what I'm giving my plants really, really hard since we started this second season. And one of the things that I'm going to start adding in is I'm going to be burning all my stalks and leaves. And that should be adding in high levels of potassium into the soil. And now that you're talking about this, since I like to maximize my time, so I want to grow like a plant, say like, 1.5 feet, 2 feet, and then flip it and just have nodes all up in there. So I'd want to push the cytokinin response. I'm kind of wondering what calcium I should add in there to counteract my ash that I'm going to be adding in. What do you guys recommend?
I'd recommend you add amino acids because amino acids are going to chelate that calcium that you do have, and it's going to allow your plant to uptake more calcium. So whatever calcium source you choose, I would at that time or maybe a week before to prep the plant and get it going, I would be adding amino acids. Now, me personally, I add them anyway every single time or close to it. So I just like what it does. I like the results after I've added. I get way fatter stems. I get better rigidity in the plant because the calcium's getting uptake so much faster. I mean, this is how much faster. It's like on its own, the roots can pull up, I think it's 1 calcium ion at a time. But with amino acid chelation, they can do up to 1,000 in the same channel. So, I mean, it's not like the difference between 1 and 2. It's the difference between 1 and 1,000. So it's a big difference. And there's a lot of products out there now that are jumping on the amino acid bandwagon. Recharge has had it for a long time, but I just saw a product from, I think it was, what was it? Like House and Garden or something that had an amino blend too now. So even the Dutch.
There are only 2 things I can't stand in this world. People who are intolerant of other people's cultures and the Dutch.
What? Take the fascia away! Dutch hater!
The Dutch. It's kind of where that came from. The Dutch figured it out a long time ago because they had to stop using fungicides and things like that, but they had to figure out how to combat that. Well, you got to get more calcium in the plant, make the outside of the plant more sturdy so that these fungus can't mine any water out of the plant. So they found out that it was amino acids. So that's why it didn't surprise me when I looked in the House and Garden line, because I know it's a Dutch brand, that they had amino acid blend. So there's another company that has amino acids, but I use raw because it's just powder.
That's what I was wondering too, is like what is the go-to nowadays? Because back when I used aminos, it was either you go with raw or Athena's aminos from Nectar for the Gods. So like, is there a natural one that I can grab, like some kind of
Yes.
top press?
What? With amino acids, I don't know with amino acids as far as a top dress. The thing is you want it to be available. You know what I mean? You don't want it to be something that has to break down and then become available, because then it gets really hard to time it. But Raw has a 100%. It looks kind of like what he's got right there. Raw has one too now that comes in like a white bag. Yeah, and it's that one's organic certified.
Well, here's the thing though, is microbes are producing that. So part of the microbial metabolites, they're actually breaking that stuff down, forming those amino acids too. So really just adding a form of calcium and a biostimulant to generate those microbes should equate to the same damn thing.
Yeah, but if you have it, throw them both in there.
Yeah, by all means.
I might be like throwing this off, but if I remember right, when I was big into Nectar, they talked about, I believe, a long chain amino acid, and that's why theirs was a little bit superior, because it would open up a lot more.
But the only one that actually works, I can remember Harley Smith talking about this too. He used to be a rep for Raw, and yeah, it could be long chain. I know it's L. There's an L and an R. I don't know if it's left and right or long and short or whatever the hell it is, but you want the L, the long chain amino acids, or the L chain, whatever.
I think there's 9 different amino acids, or for humans maybe, that we get from plants. There might be 21 that plants use. So that's I think the point of like even the microbiome of the soil and in that digestion process. So if you were to try to add calcium, I know like calcium carbonate would adjust pH. So your potash is already going to have that kind of effect. So like adding a gypsum, dolomite can adjust the pH too, that dolomite lime. So I would try to stay with like a gypsum in that case to try to match that potash. But just adding that and then talking about your micro or your biostimulants, you're going to activate all those microbes to make those amino acids that the plants really want too. So it's not like you got to have to go out and buy all amino acids to pour on it either. So
yeah, I've noticed I've done with and without, and I mean, there's not many products that I've used where I could say that I could, without a measurement, I can walk in the room and see a difference, and raw amino acids is one of those products. And I can't tell you the science behind it so much, exactly, but I can tell what I looked into made sense, and when I used it, I saw results. So, I mean, that's really why I picked raw, but I can't say that I've tried Athena's. I haven't tried anything from Nectar from the Gods, so I'm assuming it would be similar results, but I don't know.
Well, what about not on the amino acid side of things, but just on the calcium side of things? What about just adding oyster shell or something like that to your regenerative beds? Or
yeah, I mean, oyster shell, or you can even do crustacean meal. There's but these are all options that are like something that it's going to be a long time breaking down. It's not so much like a hydroponic approach where I know that I'm pouring this in and the plant's going to have it by tomorrow. It's not. It's one of those things that you have to almost either put it in there as a precautionary thing, or put it in there.
If you're building from zero, you
you
want to have that calcium source in there. It probably won't do any good if you're just building a flower only one run and then you're going to throw your soil away.
Right. Yeah. You're going to want, I don't know, it might, depending on, some people really take cycles pretty long, but in most cases, unless you're reusing your soil, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put like green sand, which I see in a lot of stuff. It's like you're only going to run one cycle in green sand. It takes a while to mine that. What? Oh, Mycos, yeah.
Rock dust, yeah.
Oh,
we were talking about this,
yeah.
And so on the hydroponic side of things, word of caution, because I know that there's a misconception sometimes when you think you need more calcium. Double check your runoff, double check your root zone EC. a lot of times what's going on is you have a high EC and your potassium levels are actually so high that you're getting a calcium lockout. So if you add some, you could probably try to add some amino acids and stuff like that. I would agree. And then, but if you add like raw calcium, you might overdo it. If you add more calcium nitrate, you might overdo it. So double check your EC, get it down into your safe range, and then reapply. Maybe even look at the pH scale and see where calcium is best uptaken at what desired pH, and work through a raw product that way once you kind of flush your EC back down into safe ranges. That's what I'd recommend for hydro or the Sith side.
Well, even on the organic side too, so something to kind of take note of, I guess, is particle size. So if you have like a granular pelletized gypsum, say, and you put that on the soil, yeah, it's going to take a little longer to break down. Just like the crustacean meal or whatever, if it's a bigger chunk, it's going to take a longer to be available. So that being said, you can get some of those powderized too if you want a faster effect for that. Definitely another thing to keep in mind as far as how quickly that's going to work for you.
So yeah, all that potash would be re-amended with a gypsum and dolomite lime mix, along with Bad Bunny to cover just a nice light all around. And then I also decided to bring in, I used to be a big fan, I still am a fan of BioLive from Down to Earth, but I discovered their BioFish, and I just like what's in there a little bit more for what I'm looking for. And then I believe the ingredients were fish meal, fish bone meal. It also had kelp, alfalfa meal, and I think there was one other thing in there that I wanted. But yeah, I plan on boosting the potassium and all that big time this time around, because I feel like I've just been going so light on the PK. It's not even funny. That, and I've been really slacking on my my micros. Like, that's why I'm bringing back in the basalt. Like, shout out to Spartan and Build a Soil for putting that information out there. But yeah, I'm hoping that wood ash part works out, because I'm over the just throwing all my leaves on the top now. I'd like to have that clean, desolate area of rice hulls and malted barley.
How long does that barley take to break down off the top there when you throw it on top of the rice hulls?
It seems like it takes quite a while, because the worms aren't venturing up to the rice hulls very much. They're just getting the bottom part of it. So I imagine it's taking a while, because you see it in all the beds still. You know, every time, even when you go to add more barley, you'll see little pellets in there.
Yeah.
Now,
That's
what
cool. Is this going to keep breaking down?
Yeah.
Just curious, what brand rice hulls do you use? The reason that I ask, I'm curious if that brand specifically is known for not having heavy metals in it particularly.
The one I went with, I can't remember the name, but I do have it linked in the past episode that we did, and I can put it down here. And it is the same company that Kevin Jodry used throughout Wonderland Nursery. That's why I went with it. I imagine he did that kind of research. Yeah.
Yeah, I would trust that recommendation. He's part of the regenerative conference.
Yeah.
I could definitely trust that recommendation. I'm sure he's well aware of all of the heavy metal testing going on in California.
Because I'm a big person. Like, when I get anything, even rice hulls, soil, all that, I repackage it into Tupperware or storage containers, whatever. Just had too many messy things with these compostable boxes and stuff.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, and on that note, we'll be right back.
Silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening. Galileo, Figaro. I'm just...
And we're back. The topic next that we had suggested to talk about is how we get our girls wet, or watering if you want to be lame about it. And myself personally, I do it. Man, this might trigger a couple people, but it's pretty easy. I literally have one of those cool little stretchy hoses that you've seen on TV infomercials. And I have a wand hooked up to that, and I just hook that straight up to my bathroom faucet, run it into my grow, and I either fill my wicking beds or do the top watering in my one room that's left that I got a top water in. And I don't worry about, aerating chlorine or chloramine out of there. I just believe I've trained my microbes or my rhizosphere, I guess to say, to handle this, especially the frugal ones, because it sits in the bed, the actual wicking bed itself. And I believe it gets to evaporate some of the chlorine out. And then the chloramine slowly gets dealt with by the rhizosphere instead of me just absolutely throwing it on there and killing a ton of microbes with my chlorine and chloramine from the top. But that's me. How about y'all?
All right. Well, I live in the city, and I have a regenerative garden in the backyard. So I have tap water, and it's, that's a lot of RO water if I wanted to go out there or mix, whatever with it or try to filter it or anything. So I use a Boogie Brew filter. It's just a carbon filter that you can it's an inline carbon filter. You can screw it right onto your tap, and then your hose can come right off of that. So then I water my garden with that, and then indoor and hydroponics and everything, I just start from zero and use a RO filter. We can get to that if you want to, but I use carbon filtration for the most part.
I was just going to suggest that for Abolish too, right? You said that. I was going to say they got thread-in filters you can run right in line with your hose and at least have something,
See, I did not know this. How much are these?
They're pretty cheap too.
They're like $40 to $60, depending on which kind you get. Yeah.
How long do they last? Like
Long time.
Long time. Okay, yeah. I really
Long
don't
time.
use that much
You
water.
can clean them. You can back flush them to clean them out, etc. It lasts a long time. And if you need to change them, they're pretty readily available, honestly.
I'm gonna have the craziest looking watering hose. I'm gonna have the little mixer that Spartan recommended. I'm gonna have the filter on there too. And damn.
You're gonna look like a Ghostbuster, man.
Right.
I have city water. It comes from the prison, so that way I'm acclimated to the prison water. But I filter it. I have it's called Berkey is the company, and I was attracted to that because it works without having it's gravity fed, so you can just fill it. You don't have to plug it in or anything like that. And I just fill my water. I've used 5-gallon water jugs, and I just fill those up. Make sure I always have at least 4 of those filled up for days of watering, because I've yet to use 20 gallons in one day, but I've gotten close to running out before. So 4 seems to be my sweet spot. As far as chlorine and chloramines, I get a report sent to me in the mail. I think it's quarterly, and they don't use chloramines, so I don't have to worry about them. But if I did have to worry about them, I wouldn't, because I use Recharge, and there's fulvic acid and humic acids in there, and those can help to neutralize your chloramines. So if you don't have a way to filter it, you can at least get a fulvic product somewhere, or a humic product, and use that, and that'll help you.
I really don't hear about a lot of people having chloramine when we talk about it, at least in Michigan, in their water. I don't remember it being in like we have Detroit City water. I don't remember it being on there either.
Must be an expensive additive then.
Yeah.
I actually run a couple different setups. I have a RO setup, so with a float valve, and I built a little stand for a reservoir that I just gravity feed down into a lower one that I have a pump from. And that was when I was mixing fertilizer. I had my lower reservoir. I could just run the RO water into whatever level I wanted, and then mix it from there. And then at another little spot, I got well water with a tall boy filter. So it's 2 stages. I know one's carbon. I forget what the other one is. I believe it removes most of the sediment from it.
Usually those two-stage filters are sedimentary filter and then a carbon filter to get out the rest.
What exactly are you trying to get out in the hard water that'll be harmful to your plant?
Well, I guess the term hard water just means that it's mineralized that way. So from what I've read or understand of it, iron and calcium carbonate are the two that you really got to watch for. So like with well water, that water is making its way through the soil and through the bedrock and into the aquifer. So if you're in more of an area where you have, say, like a lime in the bedrock, you may have more of an issue with like a calcium carbonate kind of forming and building up in that water source in the aquifer, because it's basically picking it up as it makes its way in there. And iron is the other one that's real common. So I guess both are pretty reactive in the soil and can build up in the soil.
Another thing that I remember back when I used to PPM and pH is I noticed throughout the year, like especially summer and winter, like especially during the thaw, pH and PPM would swing in the water greatly. And I believe that was because there's more lime in the water, or is it because there's more iron in the water during the thaw?
It's actually because there's more water in the water.
Okay.
So yeah. So at different times, you're getting more rain, you're getting more precipitation, and more of that water is filtering down. So you have different levels in your well. As you get to the bottom of that well, that's where all your sediment settles. That's where all your minerals and all your shit sits. So as you get closer to the bottom of the well, your content's going to change. You're going to pull up minerals. You're going to pull up all this other gunk, and that's going to change your pH too. So it's more. So I think most of that is just going to be the water. Like springtime, you get a lot more water down there. You know, I think if you're running a drought, I would definitely be checking your pH. Don't just say, "Oh, I checked it a year ago and it was this." You know what I mean? Definitely be checking your pH. I mean, I'm checking my pH every night, but to each their own. You don't have to. I just do it. Just because I've gotten such a practice of doing it, I can do it pretty quick. I do it all day at work, so it's not. To me, it's just second nature now. So it's hard to get out of that practice.
If somebody bought me one for Christmas, I'd probably use it again. But that's the only reason, because I know I got to go out and get like a Blue Lab or something really nice, or I won't be happy.
Yeah, that's why I got the Blue Lab combo meter, and I got the probe, the pH probe that actually you can pierce and you put it right into the soil, so I can get the actual soil pH if I want, which is really cool. I like that.
I just saw a tool that Blue Lab makes, and it's fairly new. That is it's like a root EC meter, but there's no digital read, and it has to like Bluetooth, and it's only compatible with certain types of devices. Unfortunately, it's about $300, but I'm sure you can get a grocery store discount or Amazon, discount or something. But dude, I mean, that's my next investment, so I don't have to mess around with runoff anymore. But anyway, so hydroponics, I like to start from zero. It's a little bit easier for me to dial in my nutrient regimen. I just go what's on the bag, and then I don't have to worry about the additional carbon filters. You may have a hard time pulling out calcium carbonate or calcium if you're on a well. I'm on a well where I do my flowering at, and my ashtray is burning and it's about to catch on fire, so it's distracting me. I'm sorry. So I have an RO filter, and a lot of people say the RO filters are wasteful, but I am on a well, so whatever excess water that gets wasted out just kind of goes back into my waste management area, my overflow and my septic tank, and then the leach system is probably going to take care of whatever minerals were in there, and then once that overflows or whatever, it's just going to go through the ground and get refiltered and get right back into the water table. Is my at least the way I look at it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I guess. But so yeah, I start from zero, and I use RO water out there just for those reasons. I'm not really sure. I have not gotten my water tested. I suppose I could do that route and then really be sure whether or not how much calcium I'm really worried about is in there. But I just do the fail safe and I start from zero and do the RO water, like I said, because I'm hydroponics.
You know, something to be kind of helpful. I don't know if we could do this. You probably, actually, I know you probably have the knowledge to do it. Could you give like an actual rundown for the, say, beginner Sith that need pH ranges from say like their clone all the way up to flower? Because I know it isn't it different in a hydroponic environment?
It can be depending on
Or do you
your,
stay
well,
5'8"
it's gonna,
and 6'5"?
yeah, it's a lot of it's going to depend on your who you're getting your nutrients from, right? How stable they are, how pH stable they are, whether or not the pH just rides all over the place when it sits in the res. I mean, you might have to always check it. With Jax and the powdered fertilizers I use, if I set my pH to 6.2, I can come back in a week to the res and it's still sitting at 6.2. That's with a decent amount of water. Now, the less water that it's holding, the pH seems to fluctuate a little bit more. So when you're down in like the 5-gallon range, it does tend to kind of fluctuate a little bit more. But in the 30 to say 50 to 100-gallon range, it doesn't move at all. So to like break, I would start first with like the filtration. You don't have to go RO. I would suggest maybe a inline, maybe a Boogie Brew type filter, something like that, or step it up a notch and go small boy sediment and carbon filter. That's going to get out maybe some extra sedimentary, especially if you're on a well. I would recommend like a tall boy. Now, what I do with my RO system is I actually have a pre-filtration system. I basically have a sedimentary, a carbon, and then goes through the RO system because there's just my ppms are like, I haven't gotten it tested, but I have checked my ppms and they're in like the 300 range summertime. So we're getting rain and stuff in the summertime. So anyways,
Say another thing I'd be curious on too while we're talking about pH is in hydroponics, do you like, I've heard some people like that they want to keep it stable at the same point all the way through, and others like a swing because there's different nutrients available at different pHs.
I was going to slowly get to that. Sorry, I was monologuing on water quality. But anyways,
oh, no, you're cool.
Once you get into like the pH things, maybe I'll try to pull up the graph here in a second when somebody else is talking, and I'll show it to you. The range of nutrient uptake kind of changes depending on your pH. Nitrogen is kind of best around like between the 5.5 and the 6.0 range. And then you have phosphorus, potassium, and other macros and micros that are best uptaken in like the 5.8 to 6.2 range. And it goes up to like, almost like a 6.5. Your best range in hydroponics is 5.5 to 6.5. I like to dial myself in like veg between 5.8 and 6.0, and I like to let it swing kind of back and forth, so I am getting a little bit of all the minerals there. And then when I get closer to bloom, I bump it closer into the 6.0 range and above. When I'm in early flower and late flower, up between 6.2 and 6.3, 6.4. As your EC builds up in your root zone and things like that, your pH is also going to swing depending on your manufacturer's fertilizers. In my case, the more fertilizer I add to a solution, my pH drops. So in theory, the higher EC in my root zone, I'm already given that my pH is going to go down. So if I'm put it in 6.2 and I check it, I have that same little pH pen that Spartan's talking about. So my EC is getting up there and I haven't had a lot of runoff in a few days. I'll check my root zone. It's like 5.9. So I know maybe I should be putting in maybe like 6.5. Maybe I need to give it a 6.5 swing, that way I can up it a little bit, because you want to keep it in that like 6.0 to 6.2 in the flower stage. We got clones 5.7, 5.8. I always play the fail safe and I just keep it at 6.0 because Jax just has a great mineralization between 6.0 and 6.4. So that's kind of where I like to keep that. And then I'll try to pull up that chart and maybe I can screen share it for you.
And it's kind of just a little side trail, but I just was talking about this, and so I had heard guys talk about how the plant can actually control pH to a certain extent in the soil root zone, and the guy I was listening to was talking about like the soil probes you guys had. He's out in an orchard field, and they can be on one side of the tree measuring a certain pH, go to the other side of the tree or a different spot and measure a completely different pH. And that was kind of just their proof of showing like that, how much that plant can actually control that pH in the root zone. I don't know how well that applies to like hydro or not, but I was just kind of thinking in the soil or living soil circumstance, the plant's actually dictating some of that itself, basically on what it wants to uptake too. So
I think it might have to do also with the water levels in the different spots of the soil to dictate a pH swing up or down. You know, if it dries out and there's nutrient left there that the plant hasn't uptaken, that could affect the pH change in in that one local spot of the soil, something like that. But out in nature, I guess that's not happening.
So calcium magnesium lockout around 5.9 on that one.
This is kind of like a hot button topic right here, because we could all pull up 4 separate charts that tell you 4 different things.
Right. I went with one that was very easy to read. There's some that have a lot of your micros in there. And this one just really kind of just showed it in more bold numbers, but this is kind of an average range from what I've seen. Here's your phosphorus. But I've also, potassium is just everywhere. So that's why I say when you're running a high EC, you're just getting potassium no matter what your pH is and everything. And then you can potentially be getting those calcium lockouts, which you need a higher pH for calcium. So, if your EC is high and you're actually in the 5.9 range, you might not even be getting any calcium. So, yeah, there's a million things that could be going wrong. And then what I use for magnesium, I don't use CalMag, okay? Here's calcium and magnesium. These are 2 separate elements. I use calcium nitrate is where I get my calcium source, and that's one of my that's my B, all right? I use an A and a B. That's my B. And then I use a magnesium sulfate, which I get my magnesium and my sulfur right here and here. So magnesium sulfate being Epsom salts, however, agricultural kind, you can get, Sam's Club kind if you want to, I'd imagine. Get the unscented. Just get the kind that's pure magnesium sulfate. Yeah, this is a basic chart, but Spartan's totally right. We could all pull up these charts and have totally different ranges depending on who created the chart, what agronomists they're following or whatever. So there's also a completely different chart for the living soil and biology of the living soil universe. Okay, and there's a completely different chart. All of these numbers are totally different. This whole thing kind of shifts, I think, up a little bit. I think it's more in like the 6 to 7 range, I think.
In soil, I like to be at 6.6 is where I like to be. That's like my sweet spot, but I'll accept 6.4 to 6. I don't like to go to 6.7. Anywhere between 6.4 and 6.6, but I really like to be at 6.6.
Now, the reason we have to adjust in hydroponics is because we're constantly flushing and things like that, whereas in soil, we have a chance to allow the biology to actually buffer, and there's a lot of natural buffering going on in the soil and things. So we could kind of talk about soil, if you want to, and soil pH and why I don't check my pH going in or anything. I guess it's important to every now and then check your soil pH and make sure that it is correct and proper.
I have to adjust my water because my water is
it really high?
Yeah, it's usually 8.0 usually. So I check my pH every time, because if I just put straight water, that's gonna fucking get a real alkaline environment real quick.
That's definitely a reason to do so. I'm recommending not checking your pH if your pH is typically neutral, which is 7.0. Or in the range of 7.0, I suppose. Okay, right. I'm gonna end my monologue there.
You're doing great.
Yeah, my basic philosophy on the soil side though is that, okay, I'm looking at my plant as a living thing like myself. And just with my own experience being a 41-year-old man, I know that most people thrive in, and animals like my dogs and my kids, they all seem to thrive on everything being the same all the time. They don't like change. They like the shit to be the same all the time. They like consistency. So I don't like to swing stuff. I like, like I said, I will accept, if I'm at 6.4, but I want to be at 6.6, I'm probably adding more. But I want to be at 6.6, but I'll accept like 6.5 or 6.4. But really perfect setting 6.6 every single time. That would be perfect for me. And it's just because of that. It's because I think that given the plant's consistency, it lets them like adapt to that and not have to like adapt to a bunch of different changes all at once. So that's the one thing that I'm really super consistent on, is what I'm watering in. Now, I'm not talking about taking soil pHs. I'm talking about that's the pH I want to water into my soil. My soil pH I let range. And honestly, the only reason I'm checking my soil pH is if I start to see a deficiency or something weird. I usually don't even check the soil pH unless I see something weird to make me want to check it. I've had really good luck at watering in at 6.6, and so that's really what I do. And it's just about consistency, and I think that's what the plants like and thrive on.
So,
can I
once
talk
again,
there's on that chart, do you have that chart yet on the pH thing? Abolish, I don't know if you can pop that up, but I just noticed a couple of things like in my notes here, like manganese, it was talking about as being needed by the plant to actually split H2O. So water hydrolysis is what it was needed for. But on that chart, like manganese was like cut off at like 5.4 or whatever. And then the other thing I noticed on there that just kind of clicked in my head is because recently I've been looking at this, but like calcium and boron kind of have a balance with each other too. So, but on that chart, they almost like butted heads, like as far as the pH. So it was almost like there was like a sweet spot. So like when you were talking, Red, about the pHs you were running into in flower, I would think you'd want, as you finish flower, you would probably want to bring that more into that boron availability side. I'm all pointing like it's like you can see my hand or some shit on there, but on that boron side, but
yeah, that's still
that boron is going to help facilitate the sugars to move out into the flower at the end of flower. So if you bring that pH to where that boron would be more available, I would think towards the end or in your senescence or flushing, I would think that would actually drive more sugar production or sugar to be pushed out into that bud. So I don't know. That was just something I noticed. Sorry to cut it, but that was like.
No, I mean,
No,
you're totally right. I've just been hearing a lot of information. I mean, when I see deficiencies or lockouts, they're coming in the form of looking like spotty magnesium or necrosis in the form of like calcium lockouts and things like that. So I'm just thinking that that's kind of what I need. I don't know. I mean, the lower the pH has gotten, the kind of worse results I've had in my experience. But then again, I mean, it could also be cultivar different. I don't know the reliability of this graph. Also, we could also check some different graphs and see some different numbers, like Spartan was saying. But I mean, in general, I would go by probably manufacturer's recommendations if there is one, because that they might have a better, I don't know, understanding of what they're using. Maybe, I don't know. Other than just, I mean, this is just theory. This is just hydroponic theory, you know. I look at this and I know what.
So
I look at this like once every couple years. You know what I mean? Because I look at the plants.
But if your pH drifts up and you say like boron is becoming unavailable, that helps facilitate calcium. So you could actually be seeing like a calcium deficiency. You know what I'm saying? So there's like a balance there too to like what you're actually noticing. Because without boron, it can't even uptake calcium. Is kind of what I'm getting at.
Right.
But it's kind of interesting, 5'8" to like 6'2". That's where like everything is.
Well, I know a lot of people they'll swing their pH, you know.
Yeah.
But like I said, I checked my root zone and it's 5.9, you know, so
It's pretty cool, bro.
I don't know. I mean,
You guys got me thinking.
I don't like playing with the swing, and I don't like, you know, I don't want to sit here and joke and say I'm not a swinger. You know? But
No,
I
my
mean,
goal is just to kind of understand it a little better. You know what I'm saying? Like it just kind of dawned on me seeing that chart. I never looked at it that way, but I just recently heard that.
Well, you have to remember too. This is for hydroponic. This one's for hydroponics specifically. Now that those availabilities change, supposedly, once you go to a soil environment. That's why I will use these charts just to give me, like what Red was saying, it's kind of like a guide, but don't take this stuff like gospel. This stuff is not like, because like I said, you can go on, you can find 100 charts that have 100 different availabilities, and then they'll split it up between, you know, different styles of growing. And it's like, well, is it available or is it not available at that pH? What the hell's going on here? So I don't know. It seems
that
like
was a Reddit chart. For one, that was a Reddit chart. Let me find something that's.
But it's all ultimately just a guess too. So you're kind of just trying to piece your information together to get your best hypothesis on it.
Well, and it's like what you were bringing up before too, Smiley, is that, you know, not only can the plant regulate pH, so can some of the microbes, you know, so there might be 3-4 different pH areas around, you know, the root zone at any given time, or maybe thousands more. We really don't know. At least I don't know. I haven't heard. And so I guess that kind of goes back towards my theory. If I can always provide a consistent water pH, I'll let the fucking soil figure itself out from there. You know, they can adjust it up, down, left, or right from there, wherever what's needed. But I'll give it that consistent 6.6. And it seems, I think everybody should really do that experiment in their garden anyway and figure out, you know, what pH your system's working the best at too, because it might not be the same as everybody else's.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering on
This one's.
Go
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead, man.
Just
I was
real
gonna say,
quick, I was
this is
wondering.
obviously the. You go.
No, you go. All right. I was just wondering real quick, because before I forget, you guys got me thinking. Like, yeah, I depend on the microbes to create that little bit of I can't remember what substance it is around them to change the pH to feed that specific nutrient to the plant. But what if we actually controlled the pH in our regenerative system? Would that make it easier on our microbes, and would they work and get stuff done a little bit more if we weren't just saying, hey, you guys fucking deal with this hard thing that's pH? And
that's exactly what I was kind of getting at when I was saying that they adapt to that environment. So yeah, the microbes are going to outcompete whatever work best in that pH, and if you can keep it at that pH, that bloom of microbes, or whatever you want to call it, you would think would just explode and do even better.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When I said buffer, that's exactly what I meant. I meant that they will take action in creating the correct pH for the plant. So I know this is kind of a silly pH chart. It's got a big pot leaf on it. Cannabis leaf on it. I don't know why I said pot leaf, but cannabis leaf on it. I mean, this one here showed 5.5 to 6.5, boron, copper, zinc, manganese, everything like this is a totally different chart. You know what I mean? So, but what's great is down here at the bottom with no ammonium at all. And I just heard a podcast, and I'll have to think back to reference it. I'm pretty sure it was old Tad Hussey one that was talking about nutrition, and they were talking about how the phosphorus, the high phosphorus need or desire is some test results that go back from some single cultivar from a long time ago in the 70s that got tested or something, and they use that kind of data. And then what they're actually seeing is that cannabis is like an ammonium heavy plant, which this here is kind of a crazy thing to see with no ammonium ranging
Yeah, because it's actually easier for your plant to take up ammonium nitrate than the other forms, from what I understand. It's like way easier on it. It can take it up in way larger amounts quick.
I just heard this one too, actually, is so nitrate is the hardest form to take up, and then ammonium, urea, and then in the form of amino acids and proteins. And that was like the best form, like the worst of the best or whatever.
Yeah, and on that note, we'll be right back.
We have the ships. We have the weapons. We need soldiers.
And we're back. Next subject tonight. It's a really, really cool one. There's a podcast by John Kempf out there that talks really, really in depth on it. And that's kind of what got all of our minds rolling on this specific one, or this specific diagram. This is really, really good to explain plant health. And we've talked about it in the past with like our John Cena cutscenes or whatnot, hybrids plants, you can't see them. And this is all about getting to that hybrids plant, producing your secondary metabolites. But Smiley, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, man. No, this is just stuff that was light bulb moment for me, and that's kind of I took a few notes just to try to hopefully make it make sense, or what made sense for me. But so he kind of breaks down plant health in those 4 stages of that pyramid. I think you guys can see, but so like stage 1 is like complete photosynthesis. And he kind of describes that as actually seeing vegetative growth every day. And that plant is, it's able to produce new growth. And that means it's actually getting complete photosynthesis enough to be able to sustain that first level of life, which is being able to produce more vegetative growth every day. So that's kind of like the stage 1. So, like that kind of ringing in my head as far as like when you start to see a plant that's stunting and it's not growing, vegetatively like normal, and you start to see some little problems, but that might be a clue that you're not even, completely photosynthesizing and creating enough sugar in that plant to even sustain its own life. So there's some, I guess, to try to translate it into what you could actually do in those stages, but he kind of laid into some of the nutrients that are really needed at that stage. And those are all the nutrients that will support the actual process of photosynthesis. So nitrogen and phosphorus are 2 of them, but those are kind of the obvious ones. But magnesium, iron, and manganese were the other 3. So in the earlier skit on the pH, I kind of pointed out that manganese, but that is needed in the plant to actually split a water molecule. So if it's not able to access manganese properly, it's actually not going to be able to photosynthesize because it can't produce the split in that water molecule it needs to actually do the conversion. So he kind of relayed that in the fact that you can be raining down all this light, it can have all the CO2 in the world that it wants, but even having full moisture, but if it doesn't have that access to that mineral, then inside the plant, it physically can't digest the water in order to photosynthesize. So, so that might be one to kind of think of on some of those. Not that you're going to be adjusting these numbers, but in those cases, trying to get the roots to eat again, trying to uptake nitrogen and phosphorus again, and get that plant health started into growing vegetatively every day, producing that new growth. And as you do that, and the plant continues to produce more photosynthesis, it's going to shift into where it can create complete protein synthesis. And so he described that as the ability for the plant to convert all the available nitrogen in one day to proteins, two amino acids, and then 2 complete proteins in order to have plenty available nitrogen in the plant sap, but not have it in a form of nitrate or ammonium. And he kind of relates those to being like bug accessibility and susceptibility there. So like the plant sucking bugs like spider mites, I would imagine russet mites, all those. He kind of included any of them like their larval stage, but what they're really after in a plant is the available nitrate and ammonium that's left in the plant sap, because that's what their bodies can digest. So just like how a cow can eat grass because their stomachs can digest all the cellulose and the tannin, where we don't necessarily eat grass or certain forms of it because we can't physically digest the cellulose or the tannins. So he described it as being similar to the bugs, to where if you can get a plant health up to where you're completely using up that nitrogen into protein, you're actually shifting the plant's carbohydrate profile and protein profile in such a way that it no longer becomes food for those bugs. And that to me seemed pretty profound. Probably a good spot to throw in the question. Or
Yeah, I was about to say another thing that grabbed my attention during it was I'm talking about not necessarily that your plant has like it's doing good, it's got everything it needs to make it to the end, but the fact that you want your plant to have a complete nutrition, everything that it possibly wanted, because if it sways to one side too much, like too much nitrogen, it's going to bring in the spider mites because that's what they're after. I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah.
And we're always, and like beyond like pest going or whatever pest resistance, this is how we unlock the true flavors of our strains, and how important it is to have that full nutrition in your plants, because you can't, to get the terps, the loud that we're looking for, you got to get to the secondary metabolites, and to get there you have to have complete photosynthesis, complete protein synthesis before you even get to the secondary metabolites.
That's kind of the thing about that first part there too, is he was saying that it falls to like what one of those 5 nutrients is kind of in the lowest availability. So he's like, you can have plenty of nitrogen, you can have plenty of phosphorus, but if your iron is unavailable, then you're basically limiting photosynthesis to that becomes the bottleneck in the production line, so to speak. So you can have an abundance of these other ones, but it's still your rate of photosynthesis still falls to the lowest one of those 5 nutrients. So adding, so iron was the one he used as an example, but iron will get tied up in the soil. So like if you apply a foliar of some type of an iron, you can see a response in the plant and its photosynthetic rate, because that was the lowest that was the lowest of those 5 available. And he was saying if you apply that and you don't see a change, then that wasn't the one that was the lowest available, is kind of how I took that.
So I'm super curious what, now we're sitting here talking about this and looking at this from our Sith side. Like, do you feel that you can hit the top of the pyramid completely through, say, like bottles and a synthetic nutrient, or do you need the microbes and all that to give you the correct micros and macros at those right times or whatever? Or are we that good enough to play God to get to there, synthetically?
No, I don't think we are, man. I saw another graph that suggested that those top two, that level 3 and 4, are only able to be reached by using regenerative practices.
John did say in controlled environment, hydroponically, the cannabis people are probably the ones that are able to achieve that. So he doesn't necessarily say that it can't be done. He just says this is typically the case. But.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only ruling out the regenerative side. I'm not ruling out the mineral uptake. I guess it depends on how strict you want to call Rule 3 or 4. But yeah, I don't know what graph I saw where it suggested those top 3 were only achievable by using that. But, you know, I've heard other professionals say that using plastic pots and things like that aren't regenerative. I don't use plastic pots. I use fabric pots, which can be regenerated and composted and things like that. But I mean, that's secondary. The minerals and salts, I mean, I guess I don't know. Again, it's going to be who's
Well, I would look at it like this,
strict.
though, Red.
Okay,
So,
that everything I'm talking about is secondary, though. But yeah, I mean, as far as mineral uptake, like we were just talking about, pH fluctuation, the addition of the right kind of microbes and things like that. But then, I mean, now you're leaning synganic. But I mean, I would say by just strictly raw minerals and things like that, look at a pH chart.
Well,
and
hold on, Red. I'm not gonna agree with that. I don't think that's synganic at all, because no matter how sterile you want to keep it, you're gonna have native microbes there. So if you add microbes,
yeah, you're right
you've
there.
got microbes there anyway. So that's I think you would still could be synthetic and use microbes.
So I guess the best way to just get the most out of your plant, and you know, work with temperature, work with lighting, work with all of these factors, and yeah, I mean, try to boost your sugar
Well,
levels. And
but would you consider somebody synganic if they brought in, say, Mammoth P to help them? Like that's designed to work in both types of environment.
that's what I'm considering.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the stimulant, or yeah, that's the microbe stimulant. So
So
yeah,
I think hydro and synthetic can totally do it. They'd just be the ones that are bringing in stuff like Mammoth P and whatnot, microbes that are designed to deal with those environments and bring up, if they have a complete micro anyways, to bring up everything the plant needs.
Yeah, I
you
was
got to
just,
look at the moving target that they got to hit. So, complete photosynthesis is providing enough nutrients for the plant at that stage of life, in that size, based on the lighting they have driving the plant. And then complete protein synthesis is being able to convert all available nitrogen in that plant sap. So now your moving target is basically trying to match what you're feeding the plant in each dose to its own metabolism based on that lighting and its size, and try to do it in such a way that it can completely synthesize all that you fed it into proteins.
yeah, but what you're saying that sounds really difficult is solved by just feeding a complete nutrient at a known level. It doesn't matter what level, say 500 ppms, it doesn't matter, and just continue to make sure that the root zone always has that available to it, and it's flushed through so that you don't have salt buildup. That means there's always those available. I mean, I'm saying perfect world,
Right.
obviously, but that's how the synthetic gets around that, because it's giving it's saying, I don't know what you want, I'm just going to provide everything, take what you want. We'll measure the runoff and see, okay, it is taking something, and adjust that way. So that's kind of the synthetic approach to that problem.
yeah, I'm not sure where on the plant pyramid, or on this the health pyramid, hydroponics would be lacking. I've seen, aside from like outdoors, I've definitely seen differences outdoors with the sun growth and things like that. But I don't know.
I don't want to sound like I hate hydro or hydro's lacking or anything like that. Like I say, I completely think it can get there, especially with somebody that's skilled, and say like you're running the same strain over and over again. You can probably spoon feed that son of a bitch and get to the top of there. But I think it's possible, but what I'm saying is it's way easier to do in like a synganic or regenerative type environment.
I looked at this chart as a cool way too, to just try to tell, get your mind around what stage of health that plant's in too. And what, I got a bunch of these written down because I'm not going to sit here and remember, I need molybdenum for this or whatever. I got it in notes, you know what I mean? But for me, it kind of helps me kind of gauge at what stage my plant is. If it's, if it's not photosynthesizing right, what could be going on? Is it water stress? And that kind of gives you an idea of where to gauge that plant health. And I think it's valid for either side, because it's just a balance of those nutrients. So if you're really hitting the balance of those nutrients with the plant, we're at its stage, with hydro, I think, yeah, definitely you can achieve those plant healths. You know,
I think it's yeah. I think that's
one side or the other. I think it's valid for both sides.
yeah. I think it's more like this is independent of everything other than the plant itself. It's just a measure of plant health, and if you use it like that, I mean, it's invaluable, really. If you look at this, it gives you a lot of information. You know, some people will walk into a room and say, "Yeah, that plant looks good," or "That plant doesn't look so good," and but with this, you can really say, "Wait a minute, how good does this plant really look?" And you can kind of dial it in. So that's kind of nice as a tool.
How much of this is dependent on cultivar or genotype or anything like that?
This applies across the board to all plants, I guess.
Yeah, like not just even like we're saying, not just resistance, like the actual flavor of the plant itself. Like you're gonna want to use a chart like this too to get that up if you're not getting what you're looking for. It's like, yeah, you can grow completely, you can finish and have amazing yields, have amazing look, but you might be missing that flavor, and this pyramid would come in on flavor, not just plant health.
Well, and that's I think too, like, so if you look at some, like, I guess I just kind of compare it with like a pitcher. So you see like those frost rails running down like a sugar leaf or whatever. To me, I have a ghost OG that I grow. That thing can throw those frost rails. But if I didn't get it just happy throughout its flowering, I don't get those frost rails. And that was the other thing that kind of dawned on me at looking at this. So like stage 3 of plant health is where the plant is able to receive most of its nutrients in the form of microbial metabolites. And that's what, so he's kind of pitching it as far as a living soil. But when it receives those microbial metabolites, it's not having to spend its energy converting what nitrogen synthesis. And so it's creating sugar, and then it takes the nitrogen and combines that with a sugar to make an amino acid. And that's in its basic form. There's different amino acids and different complexes of that. But that's basically what that plant's doing. So every form of nitrogen it's spending energy to take that. But if it can take up an amino acid from a microbial metabolite, it's like that plant just took up its car parts. So if I'm trying to build a car and I can get pre-assembled doors and bumpers, I'm going to assemble a lot more cars faster than if I had to make the doors and bumpers to put on those cars too.
Or more importantly, you have time to make a fancier or sportier car at the end, you know, a better product at the end, you know, so you get further down the line.
And then you think of like secondary metabolites, and all of those are really, really take a lot of carbohydrates to build. So like, you know, flavonoids, terpenoids, cannabinoids, those are all secondary metabolites that require a lot of carbohydrate or a lot of photosynthesis or photosynthetic energy to be used to make. So, I mean, that's where plant health really comes into factor, I think, as far as trying to get really high quality. And I think naturally we've as smokers kind of, you know, edged our way to the better smelling weed, right? The one that's really loud and popping. But that, I think, naturally was us selecting the most healthy plant, right? Like, because that's the one that produced the most terpenes and cannabinoids and had the most excess photosynthetic energy to do so.
Yeah, but always remember to not get caught up on the strain, because that's what works great in that person's environment. So I guess my point is pick those strains that do well in your environments. Don't, you know, that's the hardest lesson, that one of the hardest I had to learn is, you know, the hardest thing to do is cut plants out of your garden. But if they're a struggle and then they're not doing well for you, or it's a struggle to have them, you know, grow well, why are you keeping them when you have so many other strains out there? Grab a cultivar, you know, that's going to give them the old Spartan kick, because, you know, there's plenty of other cultivars out there that will treat you right. You just got to find the right one.
I've learned that difference in elite genetics.
From you, there's nothing that 100 men or more could ever do.
Recently, so I've gotten a cut or two from people that are just, they're just like hands down way better than some of the stuff I've got ungrown for years. So kind of enlightened me to the fact that genetics does play a role. You can dial environment, all that. So.
Yeah, I mean, anytime anybody asks me the list, number one is always genetics. I don't care if you don't have a light, you can go outside with it, but genetics is the most important thing for sure. And that's why I'll forever be a pheno hunter. I just love to hunt.
I always try to grow stuff twice, but I can usually tell the first round if it's hit and miss. There's stuff that just miss, man. I mean, it's terrible weed. There's terrible weed out there. And some people think because of the way that it looks, I mean, it looks great weed. It might smell great when it's got this awesome limey skunk, but once it dries and cures, it just tastes like the bottom of your foot smudged in like in 4-day-old yogurt. You know what I mean? And it's just not something you want to consume, dude. You know, and it's just, yeah.
There's a lot of duds out there like that. It's the exact taste that you're talking about. Like the majority of stuff you run, you'll get that taste. And then every once in a while, you get something amazing.
Back in the institute again, aren't you?
No way, Chef.
Serving that shit.
No, Chef.
No, big boy.
Come on, I gotta get this going.
What I say to you about taste? Taste.
Amazing.
It's not what Spartan's showing, by the way. Not what Spartan's showing. Spartan's got an excellent smell from what he's talking about. Would you say grapefruit and...
Jeez, that was a hell of an autoflower.
Spartan, what do you got going on down there?
Grapefruit and pine.
Grapefruit and pine.
Yeah, that's what I've been getting off it. But I'm high, so who fucking knows?
Christmas tree.
Tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we kicked it off with the Christmas tree.
That's 56.5 grams is what I got off that one.
Dude, nice, man.
This is just something I sit in the corner of my freaking mother tent and ignore. And I mean, it's just so...
Nice little auto, dude. That's sweet. How many days did that take?
Let me see. That was 98 days from it sprouted.
Sick, dude. 98 days, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm going to have to probably take some pictures for Instagram later.
What are you throwing in there now?
I got 2 going called Purple Dragons.
Yeah. That's another one I haven't done.
So I got 2 going. Hopefully one's a female. We'll see. But I got worms in both beds. So they're both now living. I love introducing worms to those beds. It's just like, oh, worm castings, scoop, worms, everything else, fucking mites, everything I got going on in there. And they just go right into the pot. And they just run and hide from the fucking bright ass light in there.
See, that's ideally what I'd like to have under each one of my lights is a nice 4x4, maybe even a 3x3, but a 4x4 would be nice bed, you know. Cedar wood, you know, charred on the inside so it's nice and waterproof, and just do it right, you know. And then never water to runoff, never have a need to like get my floor wet or anything. I could probably do it inside. But I've seen excellent results with a synganic approach with, you know, you start off with a solid base with like some cocoa and some worm castings. And I don't know, maybe you could try throwing some, you don't even really need a mineral component because you're going to use, I would use a slight bit of like an incredibly low ppm of Jacks once or twice a week, just like, you know, you get those old recommendations, but then like add the microbes and the enzymes to make sure it's keeping it clean. And I've seen some excellent results. Yeah, great yields.
Oh yeah, dude.
Terpenes in the almost double-digit range. So I mean, there's something to be said by that.
I've had some pretty successful synganics in the past. Just having that little bit of base in there to cover you. And then each week coming in there with a real low dosage, like you were saying, their growth rates were insane.
Yeah, I'd like to give that an experiment, but you know, if you're talking building beds and things, that's also an investment. So
yeah.
But if talking about our topic earlier, if you're adding a nitrate and you're shifting that auxin growth, you could have that insane growth. But, you know, are you going to judge that as like a quality growth on that internode spacing? So if you're going to try that, maybe it's something to pay attention to. I mean, this is stuff that I'm just kind of looking into too, but, you know, I maybe look into that. If you also notice you started adding a dose of that and the internode spacing really stretched, maybe that kind of gives you a clue that you shifted it more of an oxen dominant.
That can be worth the investment too. I mean, if you're getting even if you're getting like, I don't know, 1.25 the yield, you know what I mean? It's a better investment. But I mean, if you're bumping your secondary metabolite levels up 8%, you know, and total cannabinoids bumped up 8 to 10%, 12%, you know, that's definitely going to increase your profitability. And
I wonder if you can mitigate some of that internal stretching and get them closer again with manipulating the light spectrum. You know what I mean? I can't remember. Is it blue? Is it blue that keeps them tighter?
Yeah.
Maybe blast them a little bit more blue light, or put them under a veg light at that time or something. Maybe you might be able to maybe get the best of both worlds by combining both theories. You know, light theory with plant theory, I guess.
Dude, talk about plant stretch, man. I went through like the first 7 days of flower, and I was like, oh man, nothing's really stretching or doing anything. You know, I went through like the next couple of days, and I walked in there on day 16, and everything was like a foot taller. I was like, what the fuck happened? How did everything just exploded on day 12? I don't even know what the fuck happened. It was crazy, man. Sorry about all the profanity.
I always see the biggest like burst in energy right after at work, right after we do a leaf strip. If we do a leaf strip, like maybe just even if it's cleaning up the bottoms, just clean up the bottoms. You go in the next day and they're all praying hard. Then maybe we'll do another leaf strip where we do usually 3 strips total, you know, a lollipop and then 2 strips. But when we do the final prune, where we're clearing out most of the big fan leaves, the next day the plants are just like loving it, just loving life. So they don't do that so much in organics, but in that
I'm gonna
great.
I'm gonna try to wrap my head into the science behind it, and I'm gonna think that the relative humidity of the space or of the microclimates within the canopy is dropping through the deep foliation, and so the need, because of the lower RH, the need to uptake more minerals through the root zone is occurring. So maybe you're getting more minerals at that time, so you're like really fucking happy at that point. You know what I mean? That's just my theory on it, on what's going on. Maybe
I think a lot of that brain has to do with that BPD too, because that to me seems like when I started, really trying to raise my humidity with my temperature like that, and I'm not even hitting it perfect. I'm just trying to get it up a little bit from where I was, and so I run about 65%, around 80 degrees, but that seems to really be what triggered them to be praying all the time more than anything else. Was just like they were transpired properly, and I don't know. That's just kind of my observation, I guess.
And that's kind of how I'm not really defoliating much at home. I do take a pretty high lollipop, but I let like 2 foot of it just kind of do its own thing. And I think right along the same lines what you're saying, I think it's tied to humidity, because I'm dumping that 5-gallon bucket every day out of that dehumidifier, which normally in the wintertime it's super, super dry and it's not it's not even running. But the humidity's staying great in there, and I think that's got a lot to do with why I've been seeing, these last couple of yields have been higher yields, better yields, because I've been getting closer to those VBD numbers.
Yeah, dude. Speaking of that like lower bit of water in your humidity bucket, I know this is a frugal forest and we don't want to spend a bunch of money. I've purchased like extra air conditioners because I thought that my air conditioners had died in the past. This is in the past, and I wasn't using humidity gauges or anything in my little bedroom grow room or whatever. And come wintertime, I would look at the weather and it would say 68% humidity or 54, and I'm thinking that that's going to be relative humidity indoors, right? I'm not doing the math saying, oh, it's 70 degrees indoors. No, that's 30% humidity inside. Well, without a gauge in your room, you don't know this. So come wintertime, my air conditioner would stop pumping water. So I immediately thought that it was broken, right? And it's done. Oh, this damn thing's trying to kick it, trying to get it to work, knock water out of the air, right? no, you're just an idiot. Your relative humidity is really 30%. You didn't put a humidity gauge in there, so now you wasted $300 and you went and bought a new, single hose air conditioner or whatever. So, anyways, long story short, get yourself a gauge, put it in there, and understand of that exact thing. Come wintertime, the relative humidity in the air totally drops, man. It almost goes down to nothing. Well, we're in Michigan. Speaking of, our climate and our area, our zone, you go indoors, you don't have a humidifier. That's what's going on.
That kind of relates back to that plant health pyramid too, because if the plant can't properly transpire, if humidity is on one extreme or the other, because it can be too high or it can be too low, but if that's shutting down transpiration, it's shutting down the uptake of calcium and nitrogen and the things it needs to photosynthesize. So just having your humidity off, I mean, in theory, you could almost be like wasting energy by lighting a plant that's not properly photosynthesizing too. So, I mean, focusing on trying to make the most use of that plant's ability to grab that light and turn it into sugar and energy, it's basically your ability to increase your yield per watt, so to speak.
That's my current issue in my bedroom right now. I can't grow in my current bedroom without properly like adding in some more amperage and throwing in an air conditioner or something like that, just because I got a couple T5 lights in there and it heats it up so much that without ventilating the room, without ventilating the room, the temps are going to be too high. With ventilating the room, I'm sucking in dry air, and I have a little humidifier in there. But again, investing in that room is pointless when I have other space to invest in. So moving this veg space out there is incredibly critical. My relative humidity is 70% in my veg space out there, and so like you said, I'm completely wasting energy just having plants at the current propagation space. 30%, I mean, that's terrible for mother plants and clones. I mean, that's the initial critical points of growth. So for 2 months, I'm stressing my plants terribly. I have to spend the next March, when the humidity starts to come back up, I have to spend the next month trying to de-stress my moms and things, making sure that they're all good before I cut clones, because that's critical. It ends up taking an oxycloner, almost twice as long to shoot roots at 30% humidity as opposed to 70% humidity, so tons of, I mean, that's all efficiency, right? It's all setbacks.
That's the way I look at this, really, is like, I mean, everybody's setup is so different. And I know, like, on chat, it's like you want to help people, but it's almost like you can't give them a specific answer because you don't really know all these other details about their room that could really affect that. And that's, so, like, just kicking around these ideas as people are listening, I'm hoping people are like, oh, that would apply to my room, or oh, this would work for me. And that's really the idea of it, I think, is just trying to get a basic understanding of what adjustments are there and how do you tweak your room to fit and be better,
That's really the hardest part of helping people online is, remotely, is all of the questions you have to ask that if you walked into that room, you would have answered in like a minute, 2 minutes. That takes you, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, a half hour back and forth to get all that information that, you can walk into a room in a minute and be like, oh, it feels cold in here. Or, there's just so many endless things that, I see everybody shaking their head, we can all think of examples.
I have a tool bag. I have a basic Craftsman tool bag, and it has a handful of items in it, a thermal laser, it has a humidity gauge, it gives dew point and all kinds of stuff. I have a blue lab meter, I have my good old method 7s and everything. We got less than a minute, guys.
I was about to say, on the subject of final word of wisdom and sign off from everyone. Smiley, you want to go ahead and go?
Yeah, no, man, it's been fun. I love coming on and talking about it. It's stuff I'm learning along too. So I just appreciate you guys letting me hang out and talk. And I'm Smiley's Garden on Instagram. If you guys want to be in chat or whatever, we can talk about it more there too.
Support and grow.
Well, I'm Spartan Grown on Instagram if you want to find me there. And I just appreciate you guys. Appreciate you for all the knowledge. It's awesome just to bounce ideas off each other. Just magic happens every time. And hell, I'm just sitting there trimming. That's so.
Yeah.
I would have been sitting here anyway. So it was awesome to hang with you guys.
Red Setter Farms.
At Red Setter Farm, less is more. That's all I gotta say. It's always great hanging out with you guys, I guess, until it cuts me off. Love you all. Frugal Force. Cheers, everybody.
I got to shout out our Frugal Force panel here, of course. The Frugal Force, community. Michigan Bros Grill Show. Also my sponsors, Mantis Genetics, Easy Swap Pots, and Bad Bunny Nutrients. And on that note, may the Frugal Force be with you.
Oh. I hate goodbyes.
Lloyd.
Just go.
Damn button. Press the goddamn button. You heard what she said.